brainstorming and having some open-ended discussion. So from 4 to 4:15, we're going to talk about deciding your format because there are a couple of different ways that you can decide to go live in and out of Zoom. And so I want to make sure that we kind of have an idea of what a lot of our options are. Now, we're not going to cover every single way to go live because there are just so many ways. But as you remember, the real kind of impetus behind planning our Pivoting to Digital Organizing series has been mostly around empowering folks who have not kind of played in the digital space before. So we really drilled down to the stuff that we think is going to be easiest to learn and to adapt your kind of programming to without really getting into the weeds of some of the more kind of tech-driven or fancier kind of live and streaming platforms. So what we're going over today is certainly not comprehensive, but we think it's the easiest way to get up and running by having some live event. 4:15 to 4:30, we're going to focus on Zoom plus Facebook because we think, again, that is going to be one of the most user-friendly and easiest to launch ways to plan a live event. So we'll spend some time talking about how to do that. And then we'll spend some time just kind of talking through other platforms and how you can promote this event. Again, a lot of Facebook focus, but we'll touch on some Instagram too. So moving right along, I want to give you all just a real world example of kind of what a live day of programming looks like. So many of you were a part of the Texas Count Census Day activities. And so to give you an idea of kind of what those really looked like and how we program that full day of live interactive events, then we had a Coffee and Census Day kickoff, and that was a Zoom webinar. And so I know you're on a Zoom webinar right now. You should be pretty familiar with Zoom. Just in case and just because of who our intended audience is here, then I think it behooves us to spell out the distinction between a meeting and a webinar on Zoom. So meetings are probably what we're in whenever we're having kind of internal team meetings or one-on-one meetings where we want to see everybody's face. It's a little bit more kind of democratic, probably isn't the right word, but everybody is allowed to participate equally. Whereas a webinar, you really can only see your host and your panelist screen. However, people can be promoted to panelists throughout the course of a webinar, and I'll give you an example of that in just a moment. But our Coffee and Census Day kickoff, which you can go and kind of watch how that played out on the Texas Counts Facebook page, was a webinar that we streamed live to Facebook. We did take questions live on Facebook, and so, you know, if you're planning this type of live event, then almost always, as a rule of thumb, you want to make sure that you have somebody who can kind of be watching the Q&A, the chat box, and if you're streaming live to Facebook, who can also watch the Facebook comments for questions. And that certainly happens on our Texas Counts Weekly Update, which is another example of a Zoom webinar streamed to Facebook, and it happened to us for our Coffee and Census Day kickoff. So that was our Coffee and Census Day kickoff, and then after that we had what was a Zoom meeting. So why did we decide to make it a Zoom meeting as opposed to a webinar for our Let's Spread the Word Together social media happy hour? And that's because it was meant to be very, very interactive. I wanted to see everybody's faces. I wanted to you know, make sure that anybody at any time could raise their hand using the Zoom raise your hand feature, or could chat me in the chat box, or could just unmute themselves and start to ask a question. It was this wonderful time where we just kind of, you know, would talk about some potential social media posts we could do, and then we just kind of did it together in real time. And so it was almost like being in a room together. You know, if we had we envisioned that as kind of a virtual breakout session. And so again, if you were a part of this, you may remember this, but I put a little playlist in the chat box so that we had these 15-minute breaks where we could listen to music and post some stuff to social media. But that was very interactive, and we wanted to replicate the feeling of actually being all in a room together and kind of having this little work block together. So that was a Zoom meeting. we went back to the Zoom webinar format. But the reason I call out this particular Zoom webinar is because we didn't quite know which of our kind of invited panelists would kind of want to speak on the various topics that we had planned, really based on the polling. And I just thought about something, but I may include in the slides after this some resources about polling whenever you're in a Zoom webinar. But we had some technical difficulties with the polling that day, I remember, and we had really designed that webinar to be based off of the results of those polls. And so depending on what the results of those polls were, and depending on which of our potential panelists were on board, then we were promoting people in and out of the panelist role. And that just allowed a discussion to take place among 2 or 3 people at a time. And everybody could kind of just focus on the panelists who were speaking on the most popular topics based on our poll. And then our last event of that day was a Hard to Count happy hour, and that was an Instagram live. I know that there are more people on today's webinar than there were in last week's Instagram. Of course, we did record that, and we went through at a pretty, I would say a pretty detailed level about going live on Instagram. But we will revisit Instagram just at the very end of our time together today. I think going live on Instagram is so wonderfully easy. And I also think that there is an advantage to going live on Instagram with people who are just totally not involved in the census, because just kind of built into the going live feature is the ability to go live with other people throughout the course of your own live session, so that you can leverage the notifications that Instagram sends to their followers that they're live with Texas Counts or with your organization. So again, these are just some of the ways you can have a live event, but as many of you know, and as you will see in our newsletter this week, then this is the Census Digital Weekend of Action, and that is being led by the Census Bureau and is being highly promoted by the Census Counts campaign. And they are trying to kind of replicate that same energy. They're calling it Census Day 2.0. They're trying to replicate that same energy that we had, that huge day-over-day increase that we saw on Census Day based on all of our digital organizing and our virtual programming and all of that sort of stuff. And so this weekend, you'll see a lot of this sort of stuff come out. There's a lot of tweet storms involved in this. They provide a lot of sample messaging. And so whenever we talk about kind of live and digital action, then it could mean so many different things. But this is the sort of stuff that we'll focus on today. Also, just a very early kind of commercial for the Texas Counts virtual road trip that we'll be rolling out here pretty soon, which will involve programming some live events using some of the tools that we're talking about today too. So let's just take one quick step back and think about some of the different things we can use live events for, just kind of based on what we do here at Texas Counts, and hopefully get you thinking. Maybe you already have some ideas, but get you thinking about how you can use these either in your personal networks or with your organization. So whenever I say AMA, anybody who is a Reddit user is probably familiar with that term. It's an Ask Me Anything. I think Texas Counts really will be doing some of this more in the coming months. Our weekly update that takes place every Monday at noon is chock full of information, but does have plenty of time for Q&A and does kind of serve that Ask Me Anything function. But we also know of other organizations and even other kind of get out the count and complete count efforts that will literally just go set up Zoom. And whenever you're setting up a Zoom, and we'll dig into Zoom just a little bit and go over some of the features that you may not be 100% familiar with, but whenever you set up a Zoom, just because you set it up for an hour doesn't mean that the meeting's going to end at an hour. Now that is with the Zoom Pro account, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And so you could very well just be sitting in front of a Zoom all day long and invite people to come and ask you anything about the census. However, you may want to limit that to an hour, hour and a half at the most. Then you, of course, can do your traditional educational webinar. So just because I am hot off of our steering committee call, then I can give you an example of how right now we're finding that a lot of of organizations and a lot of businesses and other entities are getting something kind of that resembles COVID fatigue. We don't really want to talk about it or think about it too much. I happened to be on the phone with someone earlier today who just was really going out of their way to not have to think about coronavirus. And so that Texas Counts partner, the North Texas Commission, for example, is going out and offering to their business, hey, if you want to talk about, have a webinar or have some kind of touch to your members or to your network that has nothing to do with the coronavirus, then you very well could have us on to talk about the census. And so you might use something like the Texas Counts Weekly Update, the format that we follow for that, which is operational changes, self-response update, and an update on Get Out the Count efforts and messaging, to offer someone an educational webinar around the census that you can do live via Zoom and record for your own purposes or for the organization's own purposes. You could also, along that same vein, and the way we do in our weekly update, is use a live event as a way to walk through the self-response data. So you are here because you're a census champion. I'm talking to you watching this webinar. You're here because you are a census champion. And so you understand what self-response is. You understand the disparity between self-response from one county to another, from census tract to another, state to state. Texas moved just a little farther down in the last day from number 38 out of states in self-response to number 39 again. And we're all very comfortable with that data. Most of us are using the CUNY Hard to Count map, which you can find if you go to the homepage of the Texas Counts website. We have our link set up on the homepage of our site to just go straight to Texas and allow you to click around different counties and see how the self-response is going in those counties. But I just don't know that everybody is as comfortable kind of looking through that, right? And so you may find that a great live event is just to go live. Let's say you're doing it, a citywide event or a county-wide event, and then you can go into the census tract level and show people how the self-response varies from census tract to census tract, and use that as a way to kind of set up a challenge among your kind of neighboring census tracts. We are continuing to find that these challenges are, very, very impactful. People love a good challenge. And so kind of looking at a county like Rockwall County that has this amazing self-response rate and then some other counties that don't, then that is a great way to spark some friendly competition. We also think that your live event could be as informal as a happy hour. And so that was kind of the makeup of our final Census Day event. That was a kind of a happy hour. I think I was the only one who had a beverage, honestly. No, that's right. Someone else had one. But it's just a way to make it a little bit more fun. And so I'm sure many of you have kind of seen these Zoom happy hours already take place or Facebook Live. So that's just to get the wheels turning on some potential events. But like I said, I would love to spend some time kind of helping you brainstorm or flesh out some ideas that you have for an event at the end of this. Okay, so I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I wanted to provide you the resources. I touched on this a little bit whenever I talked about Facebook and scheduling live events. So there is a hard way and there is an easy way. Now the advantage to this hard way, which is covered in these top 2 bullet points, is that you can connect a really fancy camera and you can have a very high production quality. And what's even better is that this is using the Facebook live stream kind of platform, the live producer platform. And so there's this whole set of options for kind of gaining interest in your event whenever you use that platform that allow you to promote it and do some advertising based off of it that aren't available whenever you just decide to go live, like I'm going to show you in just a moment. So there are many advantages to this, but I would just say, thinking about who we are as census champions, we're still making this pivot to digital, and we are not kind of digital first or tech first organizations. This is a little weedsy for us. I just don't think that we need to focus on this too much. And so I'm giving you these resources in case you want to become a live streaming expert at some point soon, but we can move right on along from that. Now, I don't think that any of us are surprised that we would spend a lot of time talking about Zoom today. So, why do we like Zoom so much? One, we're all using it right now. We're using it for, social gatherings. We're using it in our work, and so we think that it's very well supported. They just rolled out a lot of new kind of Zoom improvements and updates in the last week. A lot of them are related to security and ease of access. And so we think that Zoom is in it for the long run. We really, really, really like Zoom. And when I say it's well supported, then up at the top here, I link to if you are a brand new person with Zoom, I won't spend too much time kind of walking you through, every aspect of Zoom or its features, but I will just link you straight to their amazing training program. I will say that I think that investing in their pro account is worth every bit of the $15 a month that it costs, and a little bit of a discount if you pay for the year. And that is really how you get a lot of the features that we're going to be covering in just a moment whenever we talk about kind of the integration, and even whenever I mentioned kind of keeping a Zoom room open at all times, or for longer than 40 minutes, because that's the limitation of the kind of free version. So if you're just attending a lot of Zooms, you probably have a basic account. But if you are empowered by this webinar and you want to go and start planning some Zoom-based live events, I just don't think there's any way around investing in the pro accounts. I will just say generally my philosophy with Zoom, especially if you're promoting the link to very few people or a defined list, an email list or something like that, then I would kind of eliminate as many barriers to participation as possible, meaning I don't always think a passcode is necessary, and we don't have to dwell on that too much. And then one thing that I meant to kind of highlight whenever it came to our Census Day events is that there is a great advantage to using short links as opposed to promoting the link that Zoom creates for you whenever you create a meeting or webinar. And so what I mean by that is if we just go and look up here, and the top of my screen underneath where it says Census Day with Texas Counts, you'll see that we really promoted txcounts.me/census day. And why did we do that? Because then we could swap out the link if we needed. We could, make any corrections. Let's say one of our Zoom links broke. And so whenever I say short links, I really mean using something like Bitly, which is probably the most popular kind of short link creator, to make sure that you have some flexibility, because as we'll talk about later on, you can promote a live event very extensively, but then you never know, something could go wrong at the moment that you need to go and start your event or go live. So we are definitely going to focus on Zoom. Just to kind of give you an idea, and this is kind of jumping ahead, but not really, of another great option that you have for your live events is StreamYard. So StreamYard also has a free version and then a kind of basic paid version that is a little more expensive than Zoom actually. It is $20 a month, whereas Zoom is $15 a month. But some of the advantages to StreamYard are that it's really optimized toward sharing your kind of live events, and it's really optimized on social media, and it's optimized toward making it kind of have a higher presentation value. So, Zoom is wonderful, but for the most part on Zoom, then you're either talking into the screen or you're sharing your screen. What StreamYard allows you to do is to kind of add some more interactive features into your stream. It will allow you to kind of brand it in certain ways. You can add in, colors and text box and logos and all that sort of stuff. And then because it's optimized towards social media, then you can very easily, without having to get into any of the weeds of kind of APIs or streaming integration or anything like that, share it to any one of these platforms. And as you'll see, there's a pretty good selection of social media to choose from whenever it comes from StreamYard. You can do Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, or Periscope. Of course, Twitter loves Periscope. YouTube just loves YouTube, and everything that you broadcast broadcast to YouTube automatically gets saved as a video on your channel. And so if YouTube is a place where you're already building out either a training or a resource library, then that's an easy way to kind of create content for your YouTube channel, is just to stream it, once and then be done with it. LinkedIn has wonderful reach. And of course, we all know that Facebook is very, very powerful. I will point out at this juncture, though, that one thing that is missing as a destination here on StreamYard is a Facebook events. And I will show you in just a moment that using the Zoom Facebook integration and live streaming option is one of the ways that you can actually stream to an event. So StreamYard is wonderful. I, in my perfect world, would probably use both. But if I had to pick one, then I would say Zoom. But StreamYard, great. Okie dokie. So I'm going to do something a little funny, and I'm going to show you a video right now, because I couldn't think of a way that I could share my screen and show you exactly what I wanted you to see as far as like getting set up to share on Facebook. And so what we're about to do is watch a video for one, enabling live streaming on your Zoom account, in case you have not done that. And then, once you're in the space of a meeting or a webinar, because you can stream from both meetings and webinars, then how you actually go live on Facebook. And then I will kind of talk us through what else that really means. So kind of funny that we're doing this, but let's see. And I'm hoping that Robin or Katie will text me if there's anything that goes awry with trying to do this. So let's make sure that y'all can hear what's coming out of my screen. So I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment. And now I'm going to share again, share computer sound, and play my video. Okay, everybody, how weird is this that we are watching a screen recording in a Zoom of something in Zoom, but this is the only way to really kind of show you all of the steps that you need to take to get set up to live stream. So if you have a Zoom Pro account or if you have a Zoom account, you're pretty familiar with this screen, your profile. To make sure that your account is enabled for live streaming, then you're going to go on the left-hand side to Account Management and Account Settings. Of course, there are lots of useful articles directly from Zoom on just this. And the option that we're looking for to enable live streaming is in the in-meeting advanced options. So you'll scroll down and we are going to make sure that we are checked blue, toggled blue to allow live streaming to meetings. And what that looks like whenever you are actually in a meeting and are ready to go live, then I would go ahead and just select Facebook, Workplace by Facebook, and YouTube. You just never know, and you only have to turn on this setting once. And also know that that enables it both for meetings and webinars. And so whenever you're actually in a meeting or webinar, then you will click this dot more at the very bottom of your screen. Now, different devices may look a little different, but we're basically looking for this more option. Select more. We're going to assume that we want to go live on Facebook. And then from there, it gets you set up really easily. It will, if you're already logged into Facebook, which I would probably do, bring you to a screen that looks just like this, that is going to prompt you to decide where you want to go live. So look at the options that you have here. I think very rarely will we want to go live on our own timeline or on a friend's timeline. I think that it's more likely that we're going to want to go into an event or on a page that we manage. So if I wanted to go ahead and stream this to the Texas Counts website, or rather the Texas Counts Facebook page, I would just find Texas Counts down here, and automatically it's going to make sure that I'm posting this as the Texas Counts. This is exactly Facebook page rather, and this is exactly what we do whenever we live stream our weekly updates, for example. Now, for our purposes, I want to make sure that you also know that sharing in an event is also possible. You will need to have created your event already in advance, and then from there you will want to search for your event. So I don't have anyone set up, but I happen to have come across something that said it was going to be called a live virtual open house. Now, these are public events, so they just happen to allow people to stream directly into them. But
if you have your own event and you can type the exact name, then it'll come up pretty easily. So that would be my recommendation for live streaming to an event that you can promote in advance without having to get into the weeds with live streaming software or a scheduled live event on Facebook. All right, hope that helps. I will see you in just a second.
Okay, everybody. So thank you for joining me. In that, let's go back to
Okay, everybody, how weird is this that we are watching a screen recording in a Zoom of something in Zoom, but this is the only way to really kind of show you all of the stuff.
Whew, that was stressful. Okay, so we are back, and let me get back to my slideshow here. Okay, sorry about that. So I hope that helped. And I want to hone in on that sharing your live event, or rather your live stream to a Facebook event. And so let's hop on over to Facebook really quickly and kind of see what this would look like. So I have set up as an example that we can go and get an event going in Facebook that we can start to promote. So a week out from your event, or a couple of days out from your event, then you can start to run ads on your event. You can flesh it out, and that is how you might drive traffic to an event to make sure that people actually watch it. Now, again, there is a way to set up a scheduled live stream and have people express their interest in that so they're reminded when you go live. However, I think this is probably the easier, softer way. And so I created an event for next week's Pivoting to Digital Organizing Training Series recap. And that's probably not the best name for it. But I can continue doing basically everything that I do whenever I was scheduling, real events. I know a lot of you who are on this call had already planned some really interesting kind of live events that you were probably already going to share on Facebook. Or in-person events rather, that you were going to share on Facebook. And so hopefully you're pretty familiar with the process of setting up an event on Facebook. But what we're doing is basically just setting it up as if we were going to have an in-person event. And I probably could stand to put in the description for this that this is a virtual live streamed event or something like that. But for the purposes of demonstration, I just wanted to have an event that we could go and practice with. And so as you remember from just a little while ago, then what's going to happen is that next May 7th, or on May 7th, whenever I'm in my webinar, I can stream live to this event. So in the meantime, I can put this a link to this event, which is up here in the address bar, in emails and send it out. Really try to build interest in this. I can run ads on it. So if you go up to the top and go boost event, then that brings you to our little ad manager screen. If you were in our Pivoting to Digital Organizing part 3, we talked about Facebook advertising. And so I encourage you, if you're wanting a good primer on Facebook advertising, that you go and revisit that one, because then all of this would make sense to you. So let's just assume that we are comfortable enough with Facebook advertising. We would then just boost this event. And then what's going to happen is that, just like any in-person event, then people would either express that they're interested or that they're going. And then you really have a lot of the same features for if you had scheduled that live stream the way Facebook wants you to do it the fancy way, meaning that people will get reminders on Facebook, the day before an event is coming up. They will get a reminder an hour before the event starts. And then whenever you actually stream live to Facebook as your page, let's just assume we're Texas Counts here, then you get the same impact that you have whenever we go live, for example, every Monday at noon, where people who like or follow our page get a notification Texas Counts is going live, and it exists in this event. And then of course it lives on Facebook too. So that is a little different than had you just from your event decided that you wanted to broadcast a live video here, because as we know, with Facebook Live, then you're a little limited. And like I said, I really want to focus on Zoom plus Facebook right now, because then that just gives us a platform that we're all more and more comfortable with. And that gives you kind of the most bang for your buck, because people can either watch it via Zoom or watch it on Facebook. And whenever we go live just on Facebook using this live video button here in the middle of the screen, that only lives on Facebook. And it's actually pretty hard to go in and then download the video with any kind of, decent quality. And so, yes, Facebook does have a live feature built in. I don't spend a lot of time on that because I don't spend any time on that today, really, because I think that there's a lot of resources out there for going live on Facebook. I will add a few more to the slideshow so that whenever this is sent to you, you have those. But I think streaming live to Facebook is pretty common, pretty intuitive. And we are going to focus on getting the most bang for our buck here. So that is how you might, the easy way, schedule a live event and promote it using Zoom plus Facebook. All right, where do we leave off? Let's see. Okie dokie. So I want to go back and focus a little bit on Instagram. Oh, what did I do with that? I guess while I'm finding some slides that went rogue, I will go ahead and take a little break for questions. So does anybody have any questions they want to pop in the Q&A or the chat box at this point?
There's a question from Marco. Are you allowed to share Zoom plus Facebook Live on a page and an event?
Absolutely, you definitely can.
Okay, great. And that is, that's our first question. And does anyone else have any questions for Erin right now?
Okie dokie. I may just have to, I think I accidentally just deleted a bunch of slides earlier. So no big deal, because what I wanted to talk about was Instagram. And Instagram, as I mentioned, is probably one of the most intuitive live streaming platforms. And so I would encourage you all to go back and watch last week's Instagram training, because that has, oh, I think I found my stuff again. Oh, goodness. Oh, well. And so last week's Instagram session did have some resources for going live. What I really wanted to show was kind of how you can promote an Instagram event. And so how about I just show you via my email very quickly. And let's just keep those questions coming while I dig around here. Okie dokie. So I'm going to share my screen once again quickly to show that even though we can't exactly, promote an Instagram live event just like we do a Facebook event or how we might email out about a webinar, then there are plenty of ways you can kind of promote it. Like I said, built into Instagram Live is that your followers are notified. So all you really want to make sure of is that you have, as many Instagram followers as you can have, and that you are kind of making sure that people know where to be at a certain time, because there's no real way you can send them a reminder. So this is an example of how we promoted our Hard to Count happy hour. We really just took some screenshots of some email announcements that we had already done of it, and then we posted it in our story. Looks like we did this the day before, just letting people know that we're doing something around this time. And then the day of, we sent out a reminder. As you, if you were a part of our Instagram session last week, may remember, we really think that stories are wonderful at reaching people with kind of fresh content and reminders, because Instagram just kind of has this built-in preference for putting, new content in front of people. And so there's no such thing as posting too many stories. And so the fact that we promoted this event in the space of 2 stories for within less than 24 hours, people go to Instagram because they want to have something to look at, right? And so it's not like you can't pre-promote a going live. And I gave plenty of examples of kind of how you might do that next week, or last week rather. Okie dokie. Let's see. And that was all of my Instagram stuff. Really, I just kind of sped through a lot of what we were going to cover today. And so I'm going to skip ahead a couple of minutes and see if anybody who is joining us today just kind of wants to take this time to kind of brainstorm an event. So we'll talk specifically about that example of live streaming both to I can actually show you how you might do that to live stream both to your page and to an event. So I'm going to share my screen again, and Robin, if you can remind me who asked that question, then I will pull up again how I would propose doing that.
Yes. Hey, everybody, it's Robin. And it was Marco who asked the question, are you allowed to share Zoom and Facebook Live on a page and an event?
Yes, you are. And so what I would probably do is set up your live stream just like you, or just like we kind of showed in that little video. And then you have the ability to go live directly into your event, kind of like we showed. And then this is kind of the best approximation, Marco, of kind of me showing you how to do this is, once you have the stream going in here, or rather on your page, then you can share it from there into the event. Let's see if I can find a good example. This is our Coffee and Census Day kickoff video. I want to make sure the sound is off.
In Texas, we stand to gain up to 3.
Okie dokie. And so I think this is probably one of those times where you want to have kind of tag team with somebody a little bit on how you might share this in as close to real time as possible. But let's say I already had my live stream going. I would have had that share feature already once I started my live stream on my Facebook page. And so then I could do share into my event. And so then simultaneously in my event and on my page, I would have the same stream going. And I think that's a pretty good point, Marco, because you can't guarantee that everyone who RSVPs for your event, especially if you're running ads for it, is also going to be someone who follows your page. And I think that if you are pretty smart about how you're advertising your events, then you'll end up picking up a lot of followers along the way, but there's no guarantee that there's direct overlap. And so just to kind of recap those steps for you, Marco, then you'll go through the same prompts as what we did to go live from our Zoom meeting after we've enabled live streaming. We're streaming live to our page like I did, streaming to Texas Counts. And then once your video is live, then you will share the video in the event, because it's basically just a video at that point once you connect to Facebook. Wonderful question. Let's see. Oh, and Marco brings up another good point in his additional questions that he is also sharing it on his personal page. I mean, I think that's lovely. If you're already streaming it to your business page or organization page, then there's really no downside to having people share it to their personal page just to get more reach and more views. So if we look at the kind of details on how many views we got on this particular video, it looks like we had 627 views and 15 shares, and the majority of those shares were other organizations that were kind of helping us spread the word. But then you also see that you have some people who just kind of shared it on their personal timeline. And so Marco, I think that's lovely. Once you have it going up on your page, sharing it far and wide is a wonderful thing to do. Okie dokie. Any other questions? Anybody want to brainstorm for just a little bit? Anything that you're, you had an in-person event planned and you want to, figure out how you might adapt that into a virtual event? We would love to kind of talk through that with you. All right, Robin and Katie, do you, oh, here we go. We got a question from Sarah. Is there any benefit for people to use the watch party feature over sharing? So I will just concede, Sarah, that I'm not the most familiar with, nor am I the biggest fan of this watch party feature, just because I don't quite understand it. And so I know that it is for people who are totally not involved with your video. So, they're not part of the stream and, they're not responsible for kind of sharing it out on your, other social media or anything like that. Because I do a lot of live streaming to Facebook, and I don't watch a lot of them, I think is why I'm less familiar with this feature. But if I can just give one anecdotal experience, probably about the least tech savvy, I think it was on this past Tuesday. Yeah, it was this past Tuesday. I, streamed a live webinar to Facebook, and someone who I happened to know, it was to a business page, someone who I happened to know was like the least tech savvy, most afraid of technology person and social media person I know, was able to start a watch party feature really easily and quickly. And so all I can say is that really it's more of a feature that you would promote on your on the side of people who are just kind of viewing it as an audience member, but I personally have never used it as a live stream or an event host, so I truly don't know the answer to that. It's a relatively new feature, and I'm happy to I have it in my notes now to just go find maybe one or two quick and easy articles, but I cannot think of a huge benefit to that. Marco, so I hope that answers your question, sort of, Sarah, just from my own personal opinion. Marco asks, is he able to do Zoom plus Facebook Live on his page and then also try to share it himself on the event page? Or do you have to tag team, like I said? So Marco, it is not really possible you can allow people to post in your event. So when you're in the process of setting up a Facebook event, then you will see that you basically have two options, and they're like the last options whenever you're setting up an event. One is to allow it so that only admins and co-hosts can post in the event, or one is to allow anyone to post into the event. However, sharing into an event is really something that only you can do as the, functionally the owner of the video, because it's streaming live to your page. So you, just from your personal profile and from your personal page, could not then go to your organization's page and then share it into the event, even if you have the everyone can post in this event option. You could do a post of a picture, or you could write something in the event, but sharing your live video into the event from your personal page doesn't work. So I really think that probably the tag team option is best. I think we touch on this in our second webinar, which is just kind of an overview of the page roles in Facebook, which is, even if you wanted to just very briefly designate someone as a contributor and editor to your page, so that they could do that for you, is probably the best workaround for that. But I really appreciate how you're trying to generate as much kind of exposure as possible by using this integration. So Denise asked, we had an event scheduled with music performances. Is there anything we should keep in mind to live stream something like this with speakers and performances logged in from different locations through a Zoom meeting and Facebook Live? So Denise, that's a wonderful question. Really, it depends on kind of how familiar your musical acts are with different ways that they could also stream performance. But I would say the most important thing to keep in mind is that they really want to test their sound beforehand. And so if you set it up as a webinar, so I would probably do this particularly for your music event. I would set it up as a webinar as opposed to a meeting. And the reason for that is because then people are only focusing on the panelist, and there's really not any way they can go into like the gallery view and just kind of peek around the audience. One thing I didn't mention whenever we were talking about the webinar versus meeting distinction is that you can have more viewers and participants on a webinar. And so, you know, your music, rather your webinar events can have up to 500 people. With this kind of one add-on for Zoom. And so, you know, for the kind of event that you're envisioning, you definitely want it to be a webinar so that you can have at least 100, but if you need to, even more attendees. And then that way your people who are just viewing have less control over, you know, unmuting themselves or, you know, sharing their screen or being on camera, really just having the focus on anyone but the musical acts. And so I would just say, set it up as a webinar, make sure that you get on board early. So whenever you set up as a webinar, then there's something that you can do as you're creating the webinar called Enable Practice Mode. And what that does is allow everybody to get on early, and you can have everybody kind of individually test their sound depending on their device. Sometimes you even have multiple microphones on your device. And so in the you know, bottom left-hand side of desktop Zoom, we're used to seeing that little microphone that says mute, unmute. But if you click the little caret next to that, that actually will pick up all of the microphones that are audio inputs that are attached to your computer. And so the reason I said it may depend on your musical acts kind of experience with recording onto computers and stuff like that. You never know. They may actually be set up to where they have microphones attached to their computers or that are not the built-in microphone. And if that's the case, then you'll want to make sure that you're practicing with all of the different audio input options. And the best way to do that is set up as a webinar, give plenty of time to enter practice mode, and just make sure that everyone on is set up as a panelist early. And the host, let's, you know, assume you're going to be the host. The host can control kind of who's performing, or rather who's muted at any given time from the panelist, so that you can just focus on one performer at a time. So I hope that helps. Let's see, we have a question from Maria. Did a challenge between 4 surrounding counties, competition of who can increase self-response percentage. Is there a way to automatically pop up percentage? Maria, if I'm thinking about this correctly, then really what you're talking about is just kind of, you know, being able to compare pretty quickly and in real time the response rate for certain counties. So I hope I'm understanding you correctly. And Maria, I know you're a part of a lot of our webinars and trainings, and so I hope that I'm not taking it too far back to the beginning, but I will just kind of show the fastest way I might do something like that. And that would be, like I said, the Texas Counts website now features a quick and easy link to the hard to count map in the view that we think is going to be most useful to you. And so if you click on the hard to count map there, then we really have it kind of optimized for something like what you're describing, because if I change this to counties and then I just kind of click around and select different counties. So let's say that we wanted to take these overachievers over in North Texas and kind of compare in real time, you know, what their response rates are. So I could click around to Denton, and Denton County has a 58.9% self-response rate. And then I could compare that to well, I guess let's just go to their neighboring county. So Denton County was 58 or 56.9%. Collin County is 61.5%. So there's a challenge for you. So I do think that this view of the map that we kind of link directly to from the homepage of the Texas Counts website is probably the best thing that you're looking for. So as you'll see in the last kind of 40 seconds, I was able to kind of go and compare the county rates for 4 counties just like that. All right, everybody. I don't see any more questions. I'm going to start to slowly wrap up just in case anybody has any questions. But I will also say, and again, just kind of drawing from the momentum of our steering committee that we had just before this, that, you know, we really have grown into our full support role for just anyone and everyone who is getting out the count in Texas. And so please feel free to reach out to us at any time, info@texascounts, and ask us any question you may have about census operations, self-response, getting out the count, clearly simple little digital tools like this. And so, you know, we are your Texas Count statewide get out the count effort, and we invite you to go check out the new homepage of our website, which we hope has easily accessible resources for you to get out the count, and provides you just the best of the best resources like the County Hard to Count map that we just visited. So I think that is enough for today. Everyone have a wonderful day, and we hope that you will join us next week for our series recap, where we tie it all together and kind of break down some actionable ways to apply the information that we've covered over these last now 6 weeks. Thank you again for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you, Erin. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.